Well, good afternoon. Hi, I'm Kim Bellafato from the Madison County Public Libraries, and this is our newest edition of Spice Club, where each month we feature a different spice and we cook a recipe showing you a way to use that spice. What we're working with this week is paprika. Now, if you're like me, paprika at my house is often used to add a little color. It might go on the top of deviled eggs or mac and cheese or something like that. And that's most often what we all think of for paprika. But it actually has a spice of its own. And there are really several types of paprika. Most of us, when we buy it at the grocery store, buy what's called sweet paprika. And if it's not labeled, that's what it is. You can also have a spicy paprika, which we use a little bit of that in our recipe. If you didn't have that, you could substitute a much smaller amount of cayenne pepper. But the spice itself, most often we associate it with Hungarian or German food, which is not often what we find in our area, but it has a nice heat that it adds without being overly spicy. The spice itself, I believe, came from Central and South America, but with all of the travels during colonial times, it found its way into Eastern Europe and firmly took root there. You'll also find paprika in Spanish cuisine, and they very often do a smoked paprika that's used in their chorizo sausages and things like that. Adds the red color that we're used to thinking about, but adds a smoky flavor to those meats. So the dish that we're going to make today is kind of the national dish of Hungary, and certainly the one that features paprika the best. We're going to make a chicken paprikash. And so what that is, we're going to cook up some chicken, just brown it up, and then make a sauce that goes with it that includes red pepper, onion, garlic, nice flavors that go together. We're going to add some fire roasted tomatoes in it. If you didn't have that, a fresh tomato would be perfectly fine. The waters of the tomato kind of help make that sauce. And once it's had a chance to cook and cook down, you take it off the heat and you start adding sour cream in a little by little. And so you end up with kind of a trademark sort of pinkish red sauce that comes with it that has a really nice flavor. Chicken paprikash would serve well with potatoes, rice, noodles, whatever kind of starch you might want to have with it. So we're going to go ahead and get started. The recipe calls for 2 pounds of chicken, and I opted, because it's what I had, to have use some chicken breasts. Now this is an opportunity to use chicken both skin on and with bones. If you have boneless chicken, it's okay, but you may need to reduce the cooking time just a little bit. If you use skinless chicken, you may need to add a little additional fat, because as you know, as you tend to brown up chicken with a little bit of fat in there to flavor things, that just adds to the overall flavor of the dish. So I'm going to go ahead and warm up my pan here. And this is a good weeknight meal, and I usually define a weeknight meal as anything that I can cook up in less than an hour, from starting it to throwing it on the table. So I'm going to add about a tablespoon of butter, give or take. You know, butter's the best. Let it start melting in there. And I have my chicken breasts or chicken thighs here. I've seasoned them just with salt and pepper. As I said, the recipe calls for 2 pounds. If you were cooking for a larger family, you could certainly double up the recipe. It would do that very easily, and probably, other than the browning time, not add a whole lot of additional cooking time to that process. So the very first thing we're going to do is brown up this chicken. So I'm going to go ahead and put it in the pan, and I'm going to plop it in skin down, which will enable me to season the other side of it. I've got seasoning on the skin side. And we're going to just give this, we're not cooking it all the way through. We're going to do about 4 or 5 minutes per side on that. Let me check my temperature. I don't want it to cook too fast. But as this browns and sears, the fat underneath the skin is going to render. And like I said, that kind of gives that additional really nice flavor to the chicken. If I end up with too much in there, when I get ready to throw my vegetables in, I can drain some off. But I'd rather make sure I have enough so the chicken doesn't stick to the pan as I do this. So I'm going to go ahead and season the other side of my chicken just with some straight salt and pepper. There we go. And don't be shy. I mean, you don't want it to be salty, but meat needs seasoning. You know, if it's too bland, it doesn't pick up the flavors of the other things within your dish. So I'm going to save my salt and pepper here because later on in it, we'll give it a little taste and see if it tastes like it needs any additional. So this is going to take, like I said, about 4 or 5 minutes per side. I try and not stick you with watching me sit and watch a pan cook. So I'm going to hit pause real quick and be right back with you once I flip the chicken to its other side. So I'll see you in just a minute. All right. So I'm back. My chicken, I've browned it on the skin side. It's nice and crispy looking on that side. And I've given it a little brown on the other side. So here we are. And I'm going to go ahead and pull it out of my pan. Like I said, we're not cooking it to be 100% finished cooking. We just want this meat, if it simmers in a liquid and hasn't been browned, I found it has kind of a weird texture that I don't love. So I'm looking at my oil, and I do for sure have a little more than a tablespoon in there. So I'm going to do a quick empty and just reduce the amount. There we go. Going to watch my temperature. Don't let my pan get too hot. And now we're going to add in our peppers and onions. And the recipe called for red pepper. And then it called for a jalapeno if we wanted it in there, and an onion. My family can't take it if it's too spicy, even if I like that. So I have probably about 1/3 to 1/2 of a jalapeno in there just to give it a little bit of a peppery flavor. But we're going to be using some of that spicy paprika, so I don't want it to be overwhelming. This dish gets cooled off a little bit at the end when we swirl in the sour cream, and so that's gonna take that edge down just a little bit. So I've given this a good mix, and we're not so much looking to brown as to soften. And of course, now that I poured off my oil, I'm looking at that and I'm thinking I poured off more than I probably should have. So I'm gonna add a little butter into it. It happens. Now, the one cool thing that happens when you've got peppers and onions like this is they tend to kind of soak up the little brown bits that happen in the bottom of the pan that are full of that nice chickeny flavor. And so you'll see that the little crust that might have been on the bottom of your pan, once you put the vegetables on top, they almost steam it off. They release a little bit of their natural liquid. And in doing so, they pick up the flavor from whatever meat you might have browned in the pan. So this will brown. It's also going to be about 4 or 5 minutes. We're going to add the garlic after that. You don't usually add it at the same point because garlic cooks really fast and it's easy to burn, and then it really doesn't taste good, and there would be no way to remove it. So I've got this here. I'm just going to watch as it softens. I have to show you my favorite kitchen utensil. So here I have, I think it's officially called a spatula. So if you look at it, it looks like a spoon, but also a spatula. Best thing ever. I use it for everything. But it's really nice also for rubbing up those little bits of color off the bottom of the pan as I'm doing it. So there we go. Give that just a little bit longer to start softening. To this, just to kind of give you a hint of what's to come, we're going to add about 3 cloves of garlic. And like I said, I'm going to wait till this is fairly soft before that goes in. And then we're going to add our paprika. And I have both kinds of paprika here. I do actually have Hungarian sweet paprika that's there, and surprised myself in my cabinet that I did in fact have spicy paprika, picante. So it does have that little bit of heat to it. I think the recipe I distributed, I listed cayenne because that's a little more commonly found. I'm going to use a little more of the spicy paprika than I would recommend for the cayenne. Cayenne has such a serious heat to it. I would make it with less and adjust the recipe the next time you make it if you like it a little bit spicier. I guess I don't think I talked about where paprika comes from. It's actually a ground pepper, and it is a single variety of pepper that is used, but it does it has a spicy and a sweet version. So depending on how long, and I'm not certain if it's like a jalapeno that when it's green, it has a certain level of heat. When it's red, it has another. It may be that it's similar to that, and it just spends longer on the vine, so to speak, to gain up some of that heat. Entirely possible. The only liquid that we're going to add to this dish when we reach that point is actually our can of fire roasted tomatoes. And one of the things in this dish, all the vegetables are fairly uniform in size, that the onion and the pepper have a dice much like the tomatoes. So you'll notice that sometimes that makes a more even sauce as you do it. It certainly cooks more evenly. If you preferred longer peppers or longer onions, you absolutely could do those bigger pieces, and then maybe a little more of a coarse chop on a tomato. I've seen this dish made with crushed tomatoes as well. So if at your house the kids tend to pick out whole tomato pieces, you absolutely could do a crushed tomato and they probably wouldn't even know it was there. All right, so we're looking pretty good here. I'm going to go ahead and add in my garlic, spreading that out a little bit. Like I said, I like to see it nice and soft. And this takes 3 cloves of garlic. Now, if you've watched my show, you know I like to cheat with already chopped garlic. And a teaspoon tends to equal about a clove in flavor of the fresh garlic. So I've got that in there. Let me give that a little stir. Mix it in with the vegetables. It smells wonderful. And then we're going to add our spices. And the thing you may or may not know about spices is that their flavor tends to improve with being heated. And certainly that's true for paprika, that the oils, whether you use an olive oil, whether you're using butter, whether you're using rendered chicken, you know, we've got kind of a combination going on here. All of those things tend to improve the flavor of the paprika, that it likes a fat. And I must be getting near the end on mine. So let me get the last of that in there. There we go. Take care of that last. So we put 3 tablespoons in there. And that's more than you typically would use in most dishes for paprika. Paprika appears in chilies and things like that. But for this dish, it's kind of the star of the show. And so you're going to use a little bit more. And I'm only going to put half a teaspoon of that spicy paprika because I don't want to make it so warm that nobody at my house will eat it. Can't eat that many leftovers. So we want to give this a really good stir. And now it's giving color to all of the vegetables in here. But we want to give it time to heat. Like I said, the spice gets a little bit more robust flavor with that. And it does form a little bit of a crust on the pan. I'm gonna make sure my temperature is not too high. Don't want anything burning on the bottom. But we've got that going in. And give it just a minute before we go ahead and add in the last bit. So we go about a minute. I'm going to add just a smidge more salt and pepper into it. Again, you know, it needs just a little bit to fully season that dish. You don't want it to be salty by any means, but my tomatoes don't have any salt in there. And so now I'm starting to smell that paprika smell. So I'm going to go ahead and add in my tomatoes. And I didn't drain them. There's not a whole lot of liquid in the can. But again, those vegetables need just a little bit of liquid to start making it feel a little more like a sauce. And you want to give it a good combine. Let's do that. I'll show you what it looks like. Hot pad. All right. If you're looking at my pan, you can see my vegetables all have nice color. They've all been seasoned with that paprika in there. And the little bit of tomato is sort of making it much more like a sauce, but not a thin sauce. All right, there we go. Get that off my hand. All right, and so now we're going to go ahead and add back our chicken. And I'm going to nestle it on in there, and then I'm going to scoop some of the seasoning right on top of it. And I've got some chicken juices in there, which I'm going to add because there's no way that doesn't make all of this taste that much better. So, scoop that on top. Every piece gets a good coating. And then this is going to simmer for about 20 minutes. I am a big believer in taking the temperature of meat. It's going to need to get to about 165 degrees. That's our goal. That would be a fully cooked chicken. And then at that point, we'll pull the chicken out, do our little add of sour cream, and we'll be ready to go. So I'm going to cover this up, and I'll see you back in about 20 minutes. Hey there. So let's take a quick look at our chicken. I've got my handy electric thermometer, and it is just right time-wise. Like I said, we're going to pull it when it's sitting right at about 165. And so I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to scrape a lot of these little veggies off and put my chicken on a plate here so I can finish up the sauce. And I'll show you what we look like here before we add sour cream in. And I'm going to go ahead and turn off my heat. You may know or be aware of it, but if you are working with a dairy product, you want to be real careful as far as adding that into something hot if you don't want to watch it curdle. So here we go. I'll show you what I told you. So it's turned a little more sauce-like. It's not a thin sauce. It tends to be a little thicker sauce. And in my family, when my kids were growing up, they would have been less excited about a chunky sauce like this. And I was often tricky. I made lots of things with nice vegetables. And then I took my handy immersion blender and blended it smooth. And they never knew they were eating vegetables. Mommy's sauce just tasted great. So if your family is averse to chunks in their sauce, that would be a way to get all of the flavor and not have to worry about that. So we're going to swirl in about half a cup of sour cream. And we do add it just a little bit at a time in order to just give it a chance to mix and to blend. Keep my fork out of that sauce so I don't have paprika colored sour cream. Blend it in, blend it in. Just a little bit more. That half cup. And it gives the look of being a creamy sauce. I'll show you kind of where we end up. And I've seen this much pinker, you know, at some restaurants, they'll make chicken paprikash and it really does actually look pink, that they add a whole lot more sour cream in there than I do. I want all of the flavor. I don't want to cover up the flavor of these really nice vegetables. So in the end, it's got this kind of nice, I guess, pale orange color. And then once you're ready to serve, you'll nestle your chicken back in there, cover it up again with the sauce, and it's really ready to serve. I'm going to tuck mine back in there, try not to make a mess on my counter. Tucking that back in. There we go. Juices that ended up in there. There we go. And it's just ready to sit until I'm ready to serve it. So again, it simmered about 20 minutes. I think this works pretty well for a weeknight meal. I'll cover it back up to keep it warm. And at our house, we opted to do pasta with this tonight. So you might notice I've got another pot going on there. I had cool noodles that I bought at Ingles that are called Mafalda. They were in like the Italian pasta section, a little wider than a fettuccine, and it's rippled like you would see a lasagna noodle. So to me, I thought that might hold the sauce really well. So that's what we're working on, but we're cooking it up and getting ready to enjoy this for dinner tonight. And I hope you enjoy this at your house. and are able to make any of the 3 great recipes that we offered for paprika. So we'll see you next time for Spice Club, and I hope you have a great rest of your week. Take care.